As the afternoon light streamed through the window, Tasha Powers stared at the laptop screen on her kitchen counter. She was doing a final check of her presentation materials for the business trip tomorrow when her 6-year-old son, Danny, came home from school. Mom, I'm home. Welcome back, Danny. Do you have any homework? When Tasha turned to look at him, she noticed his expression was clouded. Her maternal instincts, always sharp, kicked in immediately. As a project manager at an IT company, noticing small changes was second nature, both professionally and personally. Mom, I'm going to Grandma's house tomorrow, right? That's right. Just for 3 days. Don't worry, I'll be back soon. Danny nodded slightly, but his eyes were full of anxiety. Tasha gently placed a hand on his shoulder. 2 years had passed since her husband died. She and Danny should have adjusted to life as just the two of them by now, but whenever she had to travel for work, she inevitably relied on her mother, Margaret, and her sister, Jessica. On the surface, Margaret was the ideal grandmother, warm, active in the church's Sunday school, and known in the neighborhood as someone who loved children. After Tasha's husband passed away, Margaret had naturally stepped in to help care for Danny. Jessica, a hairstylist, ran a trendy salon on Robson Street, Vancouver's main shopping avenue, lined with high-end boutiques and unique shops. Her social media pages were filled with perfect family photos, joyful moments with her husband, their 8-year-old twins Sadie and Katie, and occasionally Danny. She earned admiration online as both a loving mother and doting aunt, but Tasha had started noticing something unsettling. In those photos, Danny's smile always looked forced. It didn't reach his eyes. Danny, she said gently, crouching down to meet his gaze. Did something unpleasant happen with Grandma or Aunt Jessica? No, I'm fine, he replied. Too brief. Usually, Danny would go on and on about school, but lately he had become quiet, especially after returning from his grandmother's or aunt's house. He would remain withdrawn for days while preparing dinner. Tasha found her thoughts drifting. Her mother and sister were the only family she had left. Her father had died of a massive heart attack when she was in high school. Can I come on the business trip with you? Danny asked suddenly. Tasha turned around, surprised. It wasn't unusual for a child to want to go with their parent, but there was something different in Danny's voice, an undercurrent of desperation. No, Danny. It's for work. She paused. But, is there something you're worried about? She stopped cooking and sat beside him. Danny was gripping the edge of the table with his small hands. Grandma says I'm a bad boy, he whispered. Aunt Jessica says I'm troublesome. And Sadie and Katie, well, they're not allowed to play with me. Tasha's heart sank still. She wasn't sure what to believe. Families were complicated. She didn't want to believe that her mother or sister could say such things to a child. She adored her nieces. They always seemed sweet and affectionate toward their cousin. There had to be some misunderstanding. That night, after putting Danny to bed, Tasha sat alone in the living room, thinking about the business trip starting the next day. Work was going well, and if this project succeeded, there was a real possibility of promotion. Still, she couldn't shake the weight of her son's anxiety. She picked up her phone and called her mother. Margaret's voice, as always, was warm and kind. Tasha, what time will you bring Danny tomorrow? In the morning. Mom, is there anything concerning about Danny's behavior? Nothing in particular, Margaret replied. That child is really a good boy, though he might be a little too sensitive sometimes. And the kids? Tasha asked gently. Danny mentioned not being allowed to play with them. Margaret let out a small laugh. Oh, that the girls have a little girls-only club, and Danny got a bit upset, but I'll make sure they include him this weekend, don't worry. After hanging up, Tasha sat quietly and gazed out the window. Vancouver's nightscape glowed softly in the distance. Her mother's voice had been reassuring, but there was something in her tone, something unspoken, that left Tasha uneasy. Was something being hidden? Still, she had no choice but to leave for her trip. In the morning before heading to bed, Tasha quietly peeked into her son's room. Danny was fast asleep, his small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, hoping this was just a case of motherly overthinking, or a child's confused emotions. The next morning, after finishing her final preparations, Tasha took Danny by the hand and headed to her mother's house. Danny was quiet in the car. Normally, he'd be begging for his favorite music or asking questions non-stop, but today, he just stared out the window. Danny, are you really okay? Tasha asked gently. If you want to talk about anything, you call me anytime. Okay? He nodded slightly but didn't speak. Margaret's house was in a quiet residential area. The flower bed at the entrance was immaculately maintained, and the walkway was lined with delicate lights shaped like roses. A few years back, her mother had even won the neighborhood's Best Lawn Award. When the front door opened, Margaret greeted them with her usual beaming smile. "Danny, welcome to Grandma's. Aunt Jessica and the twins are coming today too, yay." Her excitement was exaggerated, but Danny's reaction was lukewarm at best. While handing off the luggage, Tasha kept an eye on her son. Danny was standing close to her, almost clinging to her leg. "Mom, I have a request about Danny," she said quietly. "He's been a little sensitive lately, so please, be extra gentle with him." Margaret glanced at Danny, then said flatly, "Lately? Or always?" The comment stung, but before Tasha could respond, her mother quickly smiled and added in a bright tone, "Of course, don't worry. We'll take good care of him." Her voice was full of reassurance, but Tasha couldn't ignore the earlier remark, or the way her mother's eyes had seemed to turn cold for just a moment. Still, her departure time was fast approaching. She didn't have time to press further. "Mom, don't go." Danny suddenly started crying, clinging to her tightly. Tasha knelt and hugged him close. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'll be back soon, just 3 days." Then, in a voice barely audible, Danny murmured, "Grandma's scary." Only Tasha heard it. Margaret pretended not to, but Tasha saw it, a flicker in her mother's expression, a tightening of her jaw. In the car on the way to the airport, a weight settled heavily in Tasha's chest. Danny's whispered words kept echoing in her mind. "Grandma's scary." Why would a 6-year-old say something like that? And why had her mother reacted that way? On the plane, Tasha made a decision. When she returned from this business trip, she would find out the truth. She had to. To protect her son, she needed to know exactly what was happening behind closed doors. During the 2 days in Winnipeg for her business trip, Tasha tried to focus on work, but thoughts of Danny never left her. She called every night, but Margaret always answered with the same response, "Danny's fine, he's already asleep." "Can I talk to him? He has a slight cold, so I'm putting him to bed early." "Really? Is he okay?" "Don't worry, leave the child to me and concentrate on your work." After hanging up, Tasha couldn't shake her unease. Her mother's voice lacked its usual warmth. Something felt off. On the morning of the 3rd day, Tasha finished her presentation and was able to catch an earlier flight home. When she turned her phone back on at the airport, she saw 3 missed calls from an unknown number. Her heart skipped. She quickly checked the voicemail. "Miss Powers, we urgently need to contact you. Danny was involved in a traffic accident. He arrived by ambulance, unaccompanied by any adult. Please come to the hospital as soon as you return." Tasha's blood drained from her face, hands trembling. She called her mother. "Mom, Danny was in an accident? Why didn't you contact me?" "Oh, Tasha, it's nothing serious," Margaret said in an oddly calm tone. "He just fell down a little." "Fell down?" "The hospital said it was a traffic accident." "Well, more precisely, he ran into the road and was grazed by a car." "But really, it's just a minor injury." Tasha's voice was sharp. "Why did he run into the road? Danny doesn't do things like that. He's a child, Tasha. He missed you. He wanted to see his mommy and went out on his own. We couldn't stop him in time." The explanation made no sense. Danny was a careful, cautious boy who never went outside alone. And Margaret's tone, calm, even irritated, sounded more inconvenienced than concerned. On the flight home, Tasha couldn't stop replaying everything in her mind. Danny's whispered words, "Grandma's scary." Her mother's cold detachment. And now this accident. It was all too much to be coincidence. The moment her plane landed in Vancouver, Tasha rushed to the hospital. A head nurse met her in the hallway, explaining what had happened. A young girl called 911 and said her cousin was hurt. She gave the address and hung up. When paramedics arrived, there were no adults present. "Your son was unconscious, with a broken leg, a concussion, and a cracked rib. He hadn't eaten all day and was showing signs of dehydration." Tasha felt her knees weaken. She barely made it down the hall before spotting Danny, sitting up in bed, talking quietly with a woman. The sight of him, pale, bruised, wrapped in bandages, broke her. "Danny," she cried. He looked up and burst into tears. "Mommy." The woman beside him turned. "Miss Powers? I'm Tina Bagshaw, a social worker with Family Services." She gently touched Danny's arm. "You've been very brave." Then she looked at Tasha. "I'll give you 2 minutes. But afterward, I'll need to speak with you. I'll be right outside." Tasha followed Miss Bagshaw down a quiet hospital hallway. They entered a small private room, where the buzz of medical equipment and the hum of conversation faded into silence. The social worker gently closed the door behind them. They sat across from each other at a small table. Miss Bagshaw's expression was calm but serious. "Miss Powers," she began gently, "Danny told me the truth about what's been happening, not just today, but over the course of his visits with your family." Tasha's throat tightened. She braced herself. "He's been too scared to tell you before. He said he thought you wouldn't believe him, or worse, that you'd send him away." Tasha opened her mouth, but no words came. Her heart pounded. Miss Bagshaw reached out and lightly touched her arm. "I need you to hear this first. This is not your fault. You trusted your family. No one could have imagined." She paused before continuing. "Danny said the twins were told not to speak to him, because they might catch his uselessness. He was only allowed a small dinner and 2 glasses of water a day. They told him food and water were expensive, and that he wasn't worth the cost." Tasha blinked back tears, frozen in shock. "He was made to do a range of chores, inside and outside the house. If he cried or protested, they locked him in the basement. And they told him his mother, you, didn't really love him. That you were only obligated to care for him. That if you knew how bad he really was, you'd send him to live with his father." Miss Bagshaw paused, then asked gently, "Tasha, where is Danny's father?" "He died," Tasha whispered. 2 years ago. A heart attack." The social worker exhaled slowly, eyes full of sorrow. "Then they were essentially telling him that you'd send him to someone who's gone. That you'd rather he didn't exist." Tasha shook her head, stunned. "They were implying I would kill my son?" "There's more," Miss Bagshaw said carefully. "This morning, Danny was struggling to carry out the garbage. The bag was heavy. He said they lost their tempers, called him a waste, told him he was pathetic, and threw him out of the house. Tasha's breath hitched. They told him to go find someone who could put up with him. So he left. Trying to find you." Miss Bagshaw looked down for a moment, her voice softening. "That's when he ran into the road. That's how he got hit." Tasha sat motionless, every part of her numb except for the ache in her chest. The cruelty her son had endured, the betrayal, the isolation, the lies, was almost too much to process. She clenched her fists. "He's never going back there. Not ever again." Miss Bagshaw nodded. "I agree. We'll be initiating an investigation immediately. And from what I've seen, Danny is going to need time, safety, and support. But he's a resilient little boy. He just needs his mother. The real one." With trembling hands, Tasha picked up her phone. She wasn't calling to yell, she just needed to hear what her mother would say. She dialed Margaret's number. After 3 rings, her mother's sleepy voice answered. "Tasha? What's wrong at this hour?" Tasha steadied her breathing, keeping her voice calm. "Mom. I'm at the hospital." "Danny is?" "Danny is in critical condition." There was a brief pause. Tasha waited for the panic, any sign of grandmotherly concern. But instead, Margaret's tone was flat. "I see. So what?" Tasha's breath caught. "So what?" "Mom, it's Danny. Your grandson. I understand that. But what can I do? I'm not a doctor." Tasha gripped the phone tighter. Her mother's voice was completely devoid of worry or urgency. It was like she was talking about a stranger. "Mom, please, come to the hospital. It's the middle of the night. I'll go check on him tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow morning?" Tasha's voice cracked. "Danny is dying." There was no shift in tone. No concern. "Crying won't help anything," Margaret said. "Besides, I never wanted to take care of him anyway." Tasha froze. There was a faint, dismissive laugh in Margaret's voice. "What did you say?" "You heard me. That child is too much trouble. Always crying, always needy. Honestly, I'm relieved." Unbeknownst to Margaret, Tasha had started recording the call. Every cruel word was being saved. "Mom, you are..." "What? Wrong?" Margaret snapped. "You got married, then your husband died, and now you expect me to raise your child? I have my own life too." The line went dead. Tasha stood frozen in the hospital corridor, the phone still pressed to her ear. She had long suspected something was wrong, but not this. Not this level of coldness. Shaking, she dialed her sister next. Jessica answered on the fourth ring. "Ugh, what's wrong, Tasha?" "It's the middle of the night. Jess. I'm at the hospital. Danny's in critical condition." There was a pause, then a sigh. "Seriously? That's, well, surprising. What happened? Please come. I can't handle this alone. I have a big client tomorrow. I can't just..." "Jessica, Danny is dying." "Well," Jessica hesitated, then added, "Honestly, that kid never listens. He's always crying. Really hard to handle. I mean, this kind of thing was bound to happen." Tasha felt something shatter in her chest. "What do you mean?" Jessica sighed. "He never appreciates anything. We're kind to him, but he always looks annoyed. Cold. It's like he doesn't like us. We were babysitting for free, by the way. And all you ever do is dump him on us with the excuse of work. You know how that affects my social media? My followers notice when he's in the pictures, he always looks so grumpy. It ruins the whole vibe." Tasha's mouth was dry. "Jessica, you're unbelievable." "What? Am I being too honest?" "Everyone thinks it. That kid is a problem. That's why this happened, right?" Tasha ended the call. Her hands were shaking. Both conversations had been recorded, every chilling, heartless word. She had feared her mother and sister's behavior for a while now. But this was worse than she had ever imagined. The next morning, 8:00 a.m. Margaret and Jessica arrived at the hospital, both putting on carefully curated expressions of concern. Gone was the coldness from the phone calls the night before. Margaret clutched her purse tightly, her eyes darting around the lobby. Jessica, dressed in a fitted blazer and flawless makeup, looked more like she was attending a press event than visiting a critically injured child. She nudged the twins, Sadie and Katie, who were dressed in coordinated pastel outfits. "Remember what I said," Jessica whispered, adjusting Sadie's collar. "Look sad. No smiles. This is serious." They approached the front desk. Margaret leaned in and spoke in a syrupy tone. "Nurse, how is Danny Powers doing? We're his family, his grandmother and cousin. We'd like to see him." The nurse gave them a polite but firm smile. "You'll need to wait. Miss Powers and Miss Bagshaw will be with you shortly." Margaret frowned. "And who exactly is Miss Bagshaw? Why do we need to wait?" "I am his grandmother. We're very worried." "That may be," the nurse replied calmly, "but at this time, we ask for your patience. They'll be with you soon." Reluctantly, Margaret and Jessica followed the nurse into a quiet waiting room. The twins trailed behind, finally looking less rehearsed and more genuinely uneasy. Once seated, Margaret and Jessica began to whisper. The nurse, stepping just outside the door, paused when she caught fragments of their conversation. If he doesn't make it, she'll get insurance money. Better this way, less burden. Wonder how much she'd give us. Maybe enough for that trip to LA. The nurse's face tightened. She glanced up at the security camera above the door and checked the time on her watch. 8:13 a.m. She made a mental note. The footage will be needed. When Tasha and Ms. Bagshaw entered the quiet room, Margaret and Jessica stood abruptly. Why were we made to wait? Jessica demanded, her voice sharp. We came to see Danny, not be kept in a waiting room. Margaret added coldly, we're his family. We have a right to know what's going on. Before either could say more, the doctor entered. The tension in the room instantly shifted. Ms. Bagshaw motioned to the doctor. Please explain Danny's condition. The doctor consulted his chart. Danny has a broken leg, a mild concussion, a cracked rib, and signs of dehydration. There are also early indicators of malnutrition. Jessica's eyes widened. No, that can't be right. He's exaggerating. Margaret waved a hand dismissively. Danny's always been overly sensitive. It can't be that serious. The doctor glanced at them, his voice even but cool. It's difficult to exaggerate a fractured leg. Ms. Bagshaw continued, her expression serious. We also have information from the 911 call. It wasn't Danny who called. Young girl phoned emergency services. They said, a kid is hurt, gave the address, and then hung up. There was no adult present when paramedics arrived. Danny was found alone and unconscious. Jessica's mask slipped. He's lying again. Making up stories. Margaret snapped, you're just going to believe that child? We were busy, he wasn't alone. The paramedics were there, weren't they? Ms. Bagshaw stared at them both. Busy? While a 6-year-old was left so neglected that another child had to call for help. Tasha stood silently, her hands clenched. Her eyes moved from her mother to her sister, two women she now realized had never truly seen her son as a child in need of love, but as a burden. Jessica threw her hands up. Danny is lying. He always lies. He twists everything for attention. She turned to her daughters, Sadie and Katie, seated quietly nearby. Girls, tell them. Tell them how Danny always causes problems. How he lies and interrupts and enough, Ms. Bagshaw said sharply, stepping between Jessica and the children. It is highly inappropriate to involve minors in this discussion, especially under pressure. As she spoke, the door opened. A tall man in a dark suit entered the room. Ms. Bagshaw looked up. Ah, good, you're here. She turned to Jessica and Margaret. These are the minors I mentioned. Jessica's mouth fell open in disbelief. The man walked over and handed her a business card. Marty Turner, Child Protection Services. I'll be conducting private interviews with the girls. No, you will not. Margaret suddenly shouted, stepping in front of Sadie and Katie as if to block his path. Just then, a uniformed police officer entered the room. The atmosphere shifted. The shouting stopped. Silence fell. Without another word, Mr. Turner gently guided the girls out of the room, the officer quietly closing the door behind them. Tasha remained silent, her hands trembling. Then, slowly, she pulled out her phone. I'd like you both to hear something, she said. She tapped the screen and pressed play. Margaret's voice crackled through the speaker, cold and unfeeling. That child is too much trouble. Always crying, always needy. Honestly. I'm relieved. Then Jessica's voice followed, clipped and dismissive. Honestly, that kid never listens. He's always crying. Really hard to handle. I mean, this kind of thing was bound to happen. The room stayed silent. Neither woman spoke. But the damage was done. Jessica screamed and lunged toward Tasha, knocking over a chair. You recorded me? That's illegal. Give me that phone. Before she could reach Tasha, the uniformed officer stepped between them. Back away, ma'am. He turned slightly to address the room. Canada is a one-party consent country. Tasha was within her rights to record that call. Jessica froze, stunned. But what is illegal, the officer continued, voice hardening, is child abuse, child neglect, and endangerment. At that moment, the door opened again. Another officer entered, a woman this time, calmly unfolding a piece of paper as she approached. Jessica Powers. Margaret Elaine Powers. She began reading them their rights. Jessica's hands flew to her head. Tasha, you can't do this. My salon, my followers, what will they say? Her voice cracked in desperation. Margaret's voice rose in disbelief. You're arresting me? For what? This is a family matter. Tasha, tell them. Tell them I was just tired. You know how bad Danny can be sometimes, he cries all the time. I didn't mean, don't let them do this. Tasha's lips parted, but she couldn't speak. It was Ms. Bagshaw who stepped in. You need to understand something very clearly, she said, facing them both. Tasha is not the one doing this. I am. We are. I'm a mandated reporter. So are the doctors, the nurses, the paramedics. The moment we saw the signs, the injuries, the malnutrition, the 911 call with no adult present, we were required by law to report it. Margaret's face crumpled. Jessica started sobbing. Ms. Bagshaw turned to the officers. They can be booked now. Tasha stood still as the officers handcuffed her mother and sister. She didn't feel triumph, only heartbreak and resolve. It wasn't vengeance. It was protection. For Danny. While Tasha faced the painful truth in one hospital room, Sadie and Katie were in another, being interviewed by Mr. Turner, the child welfare investigator. Sadie sat on the edge of her chair, knees bouncing. Her hands trembled in her lap. It was me, she finally whispered. I called 911. Her voice cracked as tears welled up. Mama saw Danny get hit, and she just looked out the window. She said, don't go out there. He'll be fine. But he wasn't. She sniffled hard and wiped her cheeks with her sleeve. I got scared. But Daddy got us phones for our birthday, so I went upstairs. I didn't want Mama to hear, so I just called real fast and said where we were. Then I hung up. I was so scared she'd find out. Mr. Turner nodded gently, scribbling in his notebook but keeping his eyes kind. You were very brave, Sadie. Her voice dropped again, ashamed. I tried to sneak Danny water when I could. Mama always said not to talk to him or his stupidity would rub off. Grandma said he had to earn food by doing the hard chores, raking leaves, garbage, cleaning the gutters. Sadie glanced at the door before whispering the next part. Mama said if we told Daddy, she'd make us work and eat like Danny. And that Aunt Tasha wouldn't care. She'd hate us for lying. Her father, who had been silently sitting nearby, looked as though the air had been knocked out of him. A senior litigator used to brutal courtrooms, he had never imagined something so twisted could be happening in his own home. Then Katie was brought in. She sat beside her sister, and when asked, she said the same things, about the chores, the punishment, the emotional abuse. She added one more heartbreaking detail. I stole Daddy's special bars for when he went to the gym for Danny. So he wouldn't be hungry. Her father's eyes widened, and he whispered my protein bars. I thought they were missing. Katie's face fell, interpreting it the wrong way. I didn't mean to steal. Please don't be mad. I just didn't want him to cry when he didn't earn dinner. Tears flooded her eyes as she broke down, but her father moved fast, falling to his knees in front of her and pulling her into a hug. I'm not mad, he choked. I'm proud of you. Both of you. You did what no one else had the courage to do. You protected someone who needed help. That's what real strength looks like. Sadie and Katie clung to him as they cried, and for the first time in days Danny wasn't alone. the next 6 months passed in a blur. Margaret and Jessica were formally charged with child abuse, neglect, and endangerment. Their mugshots were printed in the local police blotter, and 3 regional newspapers covered the disturbing case. The local evening news even ran a feature on the brave twins who saved their cousin, shining a light on Sadie and Katie's quiet heroism. Jessica's once busy salon saw an immediate collapse. No one wanted a haircut from someone accused of abusing a child, and after the news segment aired, every stylist quit. Her social media accounts were flooded with angry comments. Her husband filed for divorce and was granted full custody of their daughter. With no income and nowhere to go, Jessica was forced to move back into her childhood home with Margaret. But Margaret didn't fare much better. Her longtime book club quietly asked her not to return. At church, she was shunned, and the pastor gently, but firmly, told her it would be inappropriate for her to continue teaching Sunday school. Whispers followed her everywhere. The most devastating blow came from an unexpected leak: security footage from the hospital showing Margaret and Jessica discussing Danny's life insurance, how much they might receive if he died. The clip went viral after being shared in parenting groups online. No one ever discovered who uploaded it, but it torched the last remnants of their reputations. At the trial, the judge was visibly moved by Sadie and Katie's testimony. Their words, spoken through tears but with quiet strength, painted a crystal-clear picture of what Danny had endured. The prosecution didn't need to embellish. The evidence, physical and recorded, spoke for itself. No lawyer wanted to defend the women. Eventually, they were assigned a court-appointed attorney who had just passed the bar. He negotiated a plea deal. Each woman received 8 months in jail, followed by 2 years of probation. A permanent restraining order was issued. Margaret and Jessica were legally barred from contacting or coming within 500 feet of Danny. For the rest of his life, they would never see him again. 6 months later, life looked very different, but better in the ways that truly mattered. Danny, Sadie, and Katie had become inseparable. Where once there had been fear, silence, and confusion, there was now laughter, sleepovers, and a friendship so strong it felt more like family than anything that had come before. Therapy became a part of all their lives, not because they were broken, but because they were healing. Tasha still carried guilt. Some nights she lay awake wondering how she hadn't seen the signs sooner. But with each session, and each hug from Danny, she came to understand, love doesn't mean never missing something. It means never turning away once you finally see. Jessica's ex-husband, now a full-time single dad, struggled with his own questions. How had he missed it all? But instead of wallowing, he poured himself into listening, learning, and creating a safe, joyful home for his girls. They all learned the same hard, beautiful truth: love doesn't come with conditions. It isn't earned by being easy, or obedient, or good. Real love shows up. Real love listens. Real love stays, and this time, it would.